I was fired and depressed until I found out my wife was sleeping with my ex-boss. Turns out, her betrayal gave me leverage I never expected. 6 months ago, my entire world collapsed in what felt like slow motion. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I remember thinking it was just another performance review. I'd been with the company for 4 years, consistently hitting my targets, never causing drama, always staying late when needed. My numbers were solid, better than solid, actually. I was one of the top performers in my department. But there I sat, across from HR and my direct supervisor, hearing words that didn't make sense. Budget cuts, restructuring, last hired, first fired, except I wasn't the last hired. They gave me the standard severance package and walked me out with a cardboard box like some movie cliché. The whole thing felt surreal, like watching someone else's life fall apart through a window. The depression hit me like a freight train. I'd always been the type to bounce back quickly from setbacks, but this was different. Every morning felt like swimming through concrete. I'd wake up at noon, shuffle to the kitchen in the same wrinkled pajamas I'd worn for 3 days, and stare at job postings until my eyes burned. The applications I managed to submit felt pointless. Who wants to hire someone who got mysteriously fired from a stable position? My wife seemed surprisingly unbothered by our sudden financial stress. While I was having panic attacks about our mortgage payments, she was humming while doing dishes and buying new clothes like nothing had changed. At first, I thought she was just being supportive, trying to keep things normal while I figured out our next move. Looking back, her calm demeanor should have been the first red flag. The house felt different during those months. I was home all day, but somehow we seemed to see each other less than when I was working full-time. She'd leave early for work, come home late, and always had some explanation about extra projects or team dinners. I was so wrapped up in my own misery that I didn't question it. I figured she was probably picking up extra hours to help with our finances. Money became a constant source of anxiety. We'd burned through most of our savings within 3 months, and I was starting to panic about how we'd keep up with our bills. The unemployment benefits helped, but they didn't come close to covering our lifestyle. I found myself lying awake at 3 a.m., calculating how long we could survive on what we had left, wondering if we'd have to sell the house or move in with my parents. The worst part wasn't even the financial stress. It was the complete loss of identity. I'd built my entire sense of self around being successful, reliable, the kind of person who had everything figured out. Suddenly, I was just another unemployed guy in his 30s, scrolling through LinkedIn and trying to network my way back into relevance. Every rejection email felt like another confirmation that maybe I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Update 1. The discovery happened on a random Thursday night in November. Nothing special about the evening. We'd ordered takeout, watched some mindless TV show, and I was getting ready for another sleepless night of worry. She'd gone to shower, leaving her phone charging on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but a text notification lit up the screen. It wasn't just the name that made my stomach drop, it was my old boss's name. The preview showed enough to make my hands shake, something about missing her and can't wait to see her tomorrow. I sat there staring at that phone for what felt like hours, knowing I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. The messages went back months. Not just flirty texts, but explicit photos, detailed plans for meeting up, conversations about how hard it was to pretend everything was normal when they saw each other. The timeline made my blood run cold. Their affair had started just 2 weeks after I lost my job. While I was spiraling into depression, convinced I was worthless, my wife was building a new life with the man who destroyed mine. Reading through months of their conversations was like watching a car accident in slow motion. They'd been meeting at hotels during lunch breaks, spending weekends together when I thought she was visiting her sister, even using our house when I was out at job interviews. The casual way they talked about me was devastating, like I was just an inconvenience they had to work around. But the anger that followed the heartbreak was different than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't just about the betrayal, though that cut deep enough. It was about the timing, the calculated cruelty of it. While I was questioning everything about myself, blaming my own inadequacy for losing my job, she was literally sleeping with the enemy. The man who'd fired me for reasons that never made sense was getting comfort from my own wife. I spent the next 3 days in a weird state of shock, pretending everything was normal while my mind raced through possibilities. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to scream and throw things and demand explanations. But another part of me, the part that had always been good at strategy and planning, kept telling me to wait, to think, to figure out what I really wanted to happen next. The sleepless nights got worse, but now they were filled with planning instead of just panic. I started paying attention to patterns, When she left, when she came home, the excuses she made. I noticed she'd started working out more, buying new lingerie, taking longer to get ready in the mornings. All the classic signs that I'd been too depressed and self-absorbed to see. Update 2. 3 weeks after finding those messages, I was lying in bed at 2 a.m. when something clicked in my brain. My old boss had always been aggressive about pushing boundaries, making trades that seemed questionable. During my time there, I'd kept detailed records of everything, not because I was planning to be a whistleblower, but because I was naturally organized and wanted to protect myself if anything went wrong. I'd saved everything on a personal drive before they walked me out. Account numbers, transaction records, email chains, recorded phone calls that I'd made for my own notes. At the time, I thought I might need them for unemployment appeals or future job applications. I never imagined they'd become evidence of serious financial crimes. Going through those files with fresh eyes was terrifying. What I dismissed as aggressive trading strategies were actually clear violations of federal regulations. Market manipulation, insider trading, fraudulent reporting to clients, the kind of stuff that ends careers and lands people in federal prison. My boss had been running a sophisticated scheme for years, and I'd been documenting it without even realizing it. The more I dug into those records, the clearer it became why I'd been fired. I wasn't let go because of budget cuts or performance issues. I was let go because I knew too much. My boss had realized that my meticulous record-keeping was a liability, so he got rid of me before I could become a problem. The irony was bitter. He'd fired me to protect himself, then immediately started sleeping with my wife. I spent days organizing everything into a coherent timeline, cross-referencing my records with public market data, building an airtight case. It was actually therapeutic in a weird way, finally having a project that made me feel competent again, using skills I'd thought were worthless. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my situation. But I also realized I was sitting on information that could destroy multiple lives, including my own if I handled it wrong. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about federal crimes, SEC violations, potentially millions of dollars in fraudulent activity. I needed to be smart about how I played this hand. The hardest part was continuing to act normal at home while my wife carried on her affair, not knowing that I'd uncovered something much bigger than just her betrayal. She'd come home from her lunch meetings with him, kiss me on the cheek, and ask about my job search while I sat there knowing she was part of a much larger deception. Update 3. I knew I needed legal help, but I also knew I couldn't afford the kind of attorney this situation required. That's when I remembered a college friend who'd gone into corporate law and specialized in whistleblower cases. We hadn't talked in years, but desperate times call for desperate measures. The meeting was surreal. Sitting in his downtown office, laying out months of evidence while he took notes and occasionally whistled under his breath. He explained the legal protections for whistleblowers, the potential rewards, and the very real risks. What I had wasn't just evidence of crimes, it was the kind of comprehensive documentation that federal prosecutors dream about. But he also warned me about the personal costs. Going after my former boss would mean going after my wife too, since she was now complicit in the ongoing deception. Their affair had evolved beyond just personal betrayal. She was now providing him with information about my state of mind, helping him gauge whether I was likely to cause problems for him. The next phase of my plan required acting skills I didn't know I had. I had to continue pretending to be the depressed, defeated husband while secretly building a federal case. I started leaving the house more often, telling her I was at the library applying for jobs when I was actually meeting with attorneys and preparing documentation for the authorities. The psychological toll was intense. Every conversation with her felt like a performance. She'd ask about my day, and I'd make up stories about rejection letters and networking events while knowing that within weeks, her entire world would collapse. Sometimes I felt guilty about the deception, but then I'd remember how she betrayed me during the lowest point of my life. Meanwhile, I was learning things about federal law enforcement that I never expected to know. The FBI takes financial crimes seriously, especially when they involve the kind of money my old boss had been moving around. My attorney helped me organize everything properly, ensuring that when I finally made my move, it would be devastating and irreversible. The waiting was the hardest part. I had to time everything perfectly too early, and they might destroy evidence. Too late, and they might realize what was happening and disappear. I was essentially planning to detonate a bomb in multiple lives simultaneously, including my own. Final update. The confrontation happened on a cold February morning. I'd been awake all night, running through what I was going to say, how I was going to handle her inevitable denials and tears. But when the moment came, I felt strangely calm. I placed printed copies of her text messages on the kitchen table while she was making coffee. The silence when she saw them was deafening. No denials, no explanations, just the slow realization that her secret was out. What she didn't know was that this was just the opening move in a much larger game. I told her I knew about the affair, and I knew about the illegal activities her lover had been involved in. I explained that I had evidence that could send him to federal prison, and that her continued involvement with him made her an accessory to ongoing crimes. The color drained from her face as she realized the scope of what she'd gotten herself into. Then I gave her a choice. She could help me expose everything, testify about what he'd told her, provide additional evidence of his activities, cooperate fully with federal investigators, or she could go down with him. I wasn't bluffing, and she knew it. The affair had evolved beyond personal betrayal into criminal conspiracy, and she was now complicit whether she realized it or not. She chose self-preservation over loyalty, which didn't surprise me. Within a week, she'd moved out and was cooperating with my attorney. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. She was in no position to fight for assets when she was trying to avoid federal charges. The FBI raid on my former company was everything I'd imagined and more. Federal agents seizing computers, interviewing employees, freezing accounts. My old boss was arrested at his home on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week he'd fired me 8 months earlier. The news coverage was extensive: millions in fraudulent trades, years of market manipulation, a sophisticated scheme that had fooled regulators for years. But the real twist came 2 weeks after the arrests. The company's board of directors called me personally. They wanted to offer me a position as a compliance consultant, helping them rebuild their systems and restore investor confidence. The salary was double what I'd been making before, plus equity and performance bonuses. Sitting in that same conference room where I'd been fired, negotiating my return as the person who'd exposed their previous leadership, was surreal. They needed someone who understood their systems, who had proven integrity, who could help them navigate the federal oversight that would follow. I was uniquely qualified for the job, having been both victim and whistleblower. The legal settlement was substantial too. Whistleblower rewards can be significant when the financial crimes involve the kind of money my old boss had been moving. Between the new job and the settlement, I went from unemployed and broke to more financially secure than I'd ever been in my life. My ex-wife didn't fare as well. Even with cooperation, her involvement in the affair during the active period of his crimes created legal complications that took months to resolve. She avoided federal charges, but the divorce settlement left her with minimal assets and a reputation that made finding new employment difficult. The strangest part of the whole experience was realizing how much I'd grown during those months of depression and betrayal. The person who got fired 8 months ago was naive, trusting, willing to accept things at face value. The person who walked back into that building as a highly paid consultant had learned hard lessons about loyalty, justice, and the value of keeping detailed records. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never found those text messages, if I'd just continued spiraling into depression while they carried on their affair. Would he have eventually been caught anyway? Would I have found another job and moved on with my life, never knowing how close I'd come to disaster? But I don't spend much time on those what-ifs anymore. The experience taught me that rock bottom can be a foundation to build something better, that betrayal can reveal strength you didn't know you had, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that happens to you. Now I wake up every morning in my new apartment, getting ready for a job that values my skills and integrity, financially secure in a way I never was before. The depression that once felt like it would drown me has lifted, replaced by a confidence that comes from surviving the worst and coming out stronger. The affair that was supposed to destroy me ended up destroying everyone else involved while giving me a second chance at everything. Justice isn't always poetic, but sometimes it's perfectly ironic.